So this is 1:45 in the morning, GMT in the morning on Thursday, 12th of November 2020. And this is the first edition of the Khoodeelaar campaign based in London. And it is the program called World Exclusive Diagnosis of Fleet Street, which is the collective name by which the London-based, London-centric daily English language newspapers are known. And the name Fleet Street is, of course, the name of the street in London EC4, not far from the St. Paul's Cathedral in central London, where many of the newspapers had their main offices for a long time. That's the reason. And the name Fleet is based on the river, a small river that is not a river compared to the Thames River, which is the main river next door, running parallel to the street. But it's a small river, ancient river called the River Fleet, on which Fleet Street is actually sited. Now, the reason why our campaign calls it Diagnosis of Fleet Street is because Fleet Street contains the most definitive propaganda kind of collection based on Westminster, which is not far from Fleet Street either. The Westminster, that is the Parliament, the Palace of Westminster, the UK Parliament. That is the symbolic place because that is not where the decisions are really made. The executive decisions are made at Downing Street, which is not far from Fleet Street either. Downing Street is the headquarters of the UK government at the time, but all the decisions are made secretly and by the secret element that control the agenda and the narrative. And as a result of their combined pumping of the line through the so-called Whitehall correspondents or the political correspondents connected with the mainstream kind of titles and the broadcasting counterparts, including Sky News and the BBC and the ITV and Channel 4 News and LBC, they produce the daily round-the-clock version of the line. For example, on Tuesday, the Fleet Street papers, all of them behaved as if the USA election result and the controversy was not happening. All of the headlines on the front page and the splashes were about the so-called discovery of the vaccine by Pfizer, the pharmaceutical kind of giant, and the promotion of the idea that vaccine was safe, and also it was about to be started to be kind of injected into people's bodies. Now that was a falsification on a grand scale, but that is the kind of role that the Fleet Street papers play. They're uncritical, they're corrupt, and they're completely bogus. And they are the original fake news couriers, long before the phrase fake news came into vogue. And there are contradictions already in the papers that were published from Fleet Street, let's say, on Thursday. And there have been contradictions continuing to the claims that this discovery of the vaccine was safe or that it was acceptable. There are so many questions as to the safety and the side effects and all the rest of it. Now, in our kind of first analysis of the lying by the kind of vaccine promoting kind of gang of Fleet Street, we said that that was unreal because in scientific kind of research, No such thing ever happens. So this was nothing to do with the science, nothing to do with the evidence. It was absolutely to do with the political agenda, whoever was pushing it, to tell the public, the gullibles and the vulnerable, in the mentally vulnerable, that is, in terms of the acceptance of these kind of lies. Because the presumption on which Fleet Street has been operating for hundreds of years is that the ordinary people are idiots. And ordinary people are idiots, and also they are lacking in resources, and they haven't got the material or human resources to counter the lies if they suspect any lies being told to them. And this is what also underlies the ongoing theme in support of war, and even up to the point of nuclear war. As we said, when they were appearing as guests as part of the so-called election for leadership of the Lib Dems, Ed Davey, who is now Lib Dem leader, and Joe Swinson, who was a candidate, and she was the kind of interim leader at the time, were asked by Kathy Newman, the presenter of the Channel 4 News, whether they would press the nuclear button. And the two of them gave the answer, yes, so fast that their kind of speed at which they actually gave the answer could be compared with the kind of speed of a nuclear bomb. Now, how is that possible? They call themselves liberal Democrats. That was neither liberal nor democratic. How could two MPs, at the time both of them were MPs, be asked that question by Channel 4 News for a start? What was the assumption? Why did Kathy Newman ask that question? And the answer is that, of course, she didn't have to explain it. The assumption on which the Channel 4 News agenda runs is the assumption that most people are gullibles and vulnerable to propaganda and are unquestioning. And that most people, the majority in Britain, are assumed to assume that nuclear war was okay if this was necessary. It is never okay. And that has never been discussed, examined, diagnosed by any of the Fleet Street titles or by any of the broadcasting counterparts, the BBC or the Sky News or ITV or Channel 4 News. And Channel 4, as a channel, as I said, I was one of the campaigners for the founding of a Channel 4. Not the contents of this Channel 4 kind of reflect that aim, but I was one of the campaigners in the 70s. And I was one of the campaigners, and the campaigners were not many, not kind of hundreds of thousands. We were a very small number of people from various backgrounds, and most of the campaigners, in my knowledge, my understanding, were clueless about what they were asking this Channel 4 to be. And it has turned out to be so, because all of them are silent now. All of them are silent now. And one of the racists who was supposedly active alongside with me at the time is a criminal racist who had not only no clue as to the purpose of having a fourth channel, and we'll come to updating on the explanation of fourth channel, the phrase fourth channel. I mean, this racist criminal, was employed by the Greater London Council later when Ken Livingstone became leader. And Ken Livingstone employed a number of dubious, morally dubious, that is, characters. Most of them are racist, and most of them were kind of hostile to democracy, and peace, but they pretended to be all for peace and tranquility and all the rest of it, which is what Jeremy Corbyn was about and has been about and is about. Now, Fourth Channel was actually a direct kind of comparison with the BBC having two channels. One was BBC One and BBC Two, and the third channel was ITB. There was no Channel 4. Sorry, there was no channel Sky Channel at the time, and there was obviously no Channel 5 either. And there was no internet, and the main kind of output, the political content of the BBC, both the BBC One and BBC Two, although the BBC One carried more news bulletins, but BBC Two carried enough factuals, including the Newsnight slot, to constitute a serious kind of threat to freedom of access, freedom of information, the right to be told the truth, etc. And one of the factors that had kind of been noticed by some of the campaigners against the BBC, telling lies and hiding the truth, one of the campaigners had been active, let's say, in investigating the BBC's role, who is a kind of person with scientific background called Duncan Campbell. He is from Scotland, as well as this other Duncan Campbell, who has been associated with The Guardian for a long time and was on Time Out in the 70s when I encountered him. And this second, the journalist connected with The Guardian, Duncan Campbell, is either married with Julie Christie, or Julie Christie and him have been a couple for a long time. And he's a racist and he's a moron. Now, the other Duncan Campbell is not a racist as far as I know, and he's not a moron, because he was one of the people that was also involved in the investigation into the dubious anti-democratic, anti-peace activities by the UK state and its agencies. And that Duncan Campbell was involved in publishing evidence about the spying activities, anti-democratic spying activities. If there are spying activities for peaceful democratic purposes, then there would be less objections to those activities, of course. But the question, the contention against the UK state and its agencies about spying on people was on the basis that they were not accountable, that they were not telling the truth. They were spying in order to undermine democratic, peaceful activities and activists. Something we discussed yesterday about the reference in The Guardian to Doreen Lawrence, the mother of the victim of racist murder in Eltham in southeast London in April 1993. Doreen Lawrence and her ex-husband, Stephen Lawrence's father, Neville Lawrence, were mentioned because on the day before, that was Monday, the so-called inquiry into the spies that had actually lied to the numbers of women campaigners and then had sex with them by exploiting their access to them. And that was the spying inquiry that was taking place. And the kind of common factor was the role of the Metropolitan Police, because the spies were Metropolitan Police spies. And Doreen and Neville Lawrence had two separate licensed law traders representing them in the context of their knowledge and their still outstanding claim that the evidence that was collected on them, on their family, and the supporting campaigners by the Metropolitan Police. The evidence has not been disclosed, and they have not got justice on the access to the information. And of course, they are still totally on the evidence, as they said, through Imran Khan, who represented Doreen Lawrence, and a white woman, QC, who represented Neville Lawrence. Both of them said identical kind of summary about the role of the police and the kind of behavior of the police, which the Metropolitan Police has still, 27 years since Stephen Lawrence was murdered by racists, have not given any real justification for their behavior towards and against and about the family. So, the newspapers, as well as Channel 4 News and Kathy Newman, don't discuss the nuclear kind of option. They don't explain, they don't evaluate, they don't say, let alone saying to the readers and viewers that this is entirely kind of a total final kind of destruction of the planet itself, not a party, not a country, but the entire planet. So this is the time within the month of the United Nations formally kind of marking 75 years of the United Nations, whose founding aim stated opposition, an end to the scourge of war. But there is no recognition in the British media, mainstream media, mainstream political parties, of the highest priority that needs to be given to the ending of war and warfare. Even in this week, when Trump is still dominating the fake news because of his own fakery, it has been suggested by a psychologist who has been broadcasting her concern about the unfitness of Donald Trump to be in control of any kind of office that allows him access to the nuclear kind of weapons. That has been broadcast in the last 24 hours. I have seen it. But despite the fact that is on the side kind of channel, it's not on a mainstream. And this is not in the discussion of the mainstream. So the fact that we campaigned for a fourth channel for right to kind of freedom of expression, right to the information and right to the truth, we did that, and a channel was established as a result of the campaign at every level, not just by us, but by other parties and persons. The Channel 4, when it has become operational, has not lived up to our campaigning demands or the society's campaigning needs. Channel 4 has become another channel, and in some cases it has become even a creepy kind of platform. Creepy in the sense that it has been kind of inserting dubious kind of factors to cast doubt on the integrity and the humanity and the basic human rights of people who are poor or pushed in poverty. And the notorious series Benefit Street is the creation of Channel 4 Creeps. This was the exact opposite of what we would have wanted a fourth channel to contribute. We wanted the myths against poor people and people in poverty and people who are unjustly treated to be debunked and the truth to be told about their rights. But the Channel 4 has been doing the opposite. Over the first 10 years, I kept engaged with the Channel 4 in an attempt to see how far I had to go in order to get it to tell the truth. So I broadcast a number of programs, and I also took part in a number of editions of the Right to Reply. And the contents of those are self-explanatory. What I'm saying now is what I was saying there. And the program that I did in January 1992, in the slot, I did a number of slots, but this particular edition on the slot was about poverty and hunger in Asia and Africa, and it was done like 28 years ago, when John Major was in post as Prime Minister. Now, Major was in post as Prime Minister when I did a number of things involving the role of the Prime Minister. And one of them was to convince him and his regime to donate to Bangladesh cause of cyclone victims in 1991, to donate 50 million pounds. That was increased from 50,000 pounds the few days ago, and it was increased after I appeared at number 10 Downing Street delivering the demand, which I wrote by hand on the street, waiting to be allowed into the Downing Street itself. And this was featured as number one item in the main evening news of the BBC One on the 4th of May, the day that I appeared there, 4th of May 1991. And that edition was presented by the BBC's then staff, Clarence Mitchell. Clarence Mitchell, the same Clarence Mitchell who many years later became the spokesperson, media spokesperson for the parents of the tragic girl Madeleine McCann, just sourcing and identifying the sources. Now, the reason why the agenda of the media is the most important agenda that has to be discussed is because it affects everything. It affects people's perception about society. It affects people's rights about the state and generally, and it affects people's safety, and it affects people's, of course, health in the current pandemic kind of crisis. So when we discuss and diagnose the media, we diagnose the rest of society as well. So hope it is clear why we call it diagnosis of Fleet Street instead of diagnosis of British politics or whatever, because Fleet Street and the mainstream media covers everything because they are the couriers. They are the couriers of the wrong messages, the lies and untruths. And that is where we discussed everything under the sun, if you like, under the sun, that is to say, on this island and related to all parts of the world in context. And it also, in our unique, exclusive diagnosis, has contextual, temporal, that is to say, when temporal means to do with time. It is to do with when it is relevant. We also refer to the role of the British Empire. And we often refer to, in the context of the subcontinent, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, we refer to Thomas Babington Macaulay, because he was one of the most influential imperialist racists that messed up the education kind of narrative. But that is one of the things that are citable as an example. So we talk about Macaulay. Nobody else talks about the Macaulay. And we also, obviously, in the same kind of context, the same kind of sense, talk about the East India Company. And we talk about the brainwashed gullibles. And we talk about the likes of William Radici. William Radici is almost hero worshipped by the Bengali brainwashed morons who give him more credit because he's a white person who apparently has learned Bengali language. He hasn't. He has mislearned and his interpretation has been completely misleading and false, and very much to do with the imperialist agenda. So the fact that these morons worship William Radici shows that Macaulay, in a perverse way, was correct in the sense that he said that there would be these brown people on the outside, he said, and on the inside there would be English. If they were schooled in English, I'm using the word schooled. I mean, education doesn't arise. Education is not the same as schooling. In fact, education and schooling are two different things altogether. Education is different, and the first difference is the education is enlightenment. Enlightenment with the truth, objective, universal truth. Schooling is not. And we shall be obviously elaborating on that difference in due course as we move on this edition or in editions to come. Now, today's newspapers, the Fleet Street papers we start with, have not yet been available because the shops will not open until a few hours later. And we only go to a shop when it is essential kind of trips under the lockdown. And the location where we collect the kind of titles is further removed from the usual place where the Khoodeelaar campaign was set up. And that is part of the consequence of the damages inflicted on the campaign by the criminals making the decisions in Tower Hamlets Council, and the continuing distance is also attributable to or linkable to the counterpart criminals in the Newham Council. And we have therefore to treat this particular edition as a kind of initial edition, the preview, let's say, of what is going to be literally on the front pages. So we shall take a look at the front pages as far as we can access those at this time. So the stories that are going to be kind of splashed on the front pages tomorrow, that is during the day, it is already Thursday, but a few hours into the day, Thursday. This is only 1 hour and 13 minutes into Thursday officially. So when that happens, we shall be taking a detailed diagnostic look. And it is possible to look at some of them. The Daily Star has got a front page kind of splash on a BGT television program actor. And the Daily Boris Graph has got a piece on the Jeremy Corbyn, who says that the BBC should reveal staff social class. That is typical of Jeremy Corbyn, because he's doing a safe kind of peddling. He's still not talking about racism. And the BBC's predominantly racist, imperialistic, lying structure, agenda, and everything else. And the Daily Mirror says that heart attacks and strokes to rise by 30%. And the Murdoch scum is talking about the Boris Johnson minister in the name of defense. I mean, whenever Gavin Williamson is portrayed in Fleet Street, on the evidence, strictly on the evidence, we can say that this is certainly another kind of push by Boris Johnson to achieve two things. One is to deflect attention from Boris Johnson's own failures and criminality and dishonesty, but also to find another person who is worse than Boris Johnson. That's the idea, and that is the role that this son is, or this scum is playing today. It's talking about the 20 billion defense kind of budget crisis or shortage. And they're calling him Minister of Silly Wars, and they're painting him with, the Fawlty Towers actor John Cleese with his leg up, right leg up in the air, in the kind of pretense posture, pretending to be German, Nazi. And they're calling him Minister of Silly Wars, like silly walks. And the Daily Mail confesses that diabetes is about to explode in Britain, which is not the Daily Mail is witnessing, admitting it, but we are saying it on the evidence that is part of the kind of agenda, part of the agenda of negligence that has been in action for 70 years since the National Health Service was kind of founded. Inaction and failure to take necessary action to provide a fit health service at the point of need in Britain. And health service includes genuine education program that has been absent, and genuine social care action and agenda that has been absent. And the agenda actually has been to deny those things. And the Daily Mail has been the platform, one of the platforms, apart from the Daily Express, that has been in denial of the need for such dedicated preparation and education. So we should be talking about that when the papers actually are available. The Two Beards owned Independent Online, which is only online, is talking about Trump in turmoil. And they're saying that former fixer has evidence for Russia probe. His lawyer says, the Trump's lawyer says, threat of impeachment hangs over the White House. But President hits back, claiming stories are made up. Now, one point that I have to make about the US kind of election and the multiple claims by Trump that the election counts were rigged. If the votes for the president post were rigged, because the election took place on the same day with the same ballot that contained the particular relevant periodic candidates for the Senate as well as the Congress. Now, how did the counters kind of separate the votes from the same kind of lot and fake it? It is physically impossible. Now, why hasn't the Democratic Party or the mainstream media in the USA pointed this out? I mean, there is no case, there is no reasonable, there is no factual, there is no evidence-based case, there is no scientific, there is no mathematical, there is no rational case that Trump can make on that basis. And I'm making this as part of the exclusive diagnosis of the media. That media includes the American mainstream media as well. And the Guardian has got a different kind of headline to Corbyn's line about the BBC. It says, tax Facebook and Netflix. Netflix to fund the BBC, says Corbyn. And the Times has the main splash on the front page. Trump's former lawyer to assist Russia inquiry. And the Daily Express, again, absolutely corruptly and stupidly repeating the same headline. Britain will thrive outside the EU. Out of context, out of the main kind of topics, and completely out of their minds. That is, they are talking absolute idiocy and rubbish. Trump lawyer, that is the headline on the Metro, which is the morning local London newspaper. So the headline is Trump lawyer, he is a criminal, that is, Trump is a criminal. And as if to respond to that, the Financial Times is running the front page splash, literally answering that charge by Cohen. It says, Trump lashes out at Cohen as prosecutors close on inner circle. Now, by prosecutors, of course, are being referred to as the people who are investigating Trump's crimes. And the second point I'd make about the count and the refusal on the part of Trump to accept the result of the presidential election is his knowledge, because he alone knows how many crimes he has committed. That he may, I'm not saying he will, because that will be a very significant difference. I can only say, logically on the evidence, as an observer and as an observation, that he may face any number of criminal suits against him, in addition to any number of civil suits against him, in addition to any number of kind of suits that are about the abuse of the office in terms of constitutionality. And it is most unlikely, I'm not saying it is impossible, it's most unlikely that the judges that belong to the right wing, and the significant numbers of them were kind of currently, recent ones, were kind of appointed by Trump. Even though that is the case, if the Supreme Court does anything stupid in upholding Trump and his stupidity and criminality, then the basis of the Supreme Court itself will be put under severe pressure. So the Supreme Court judges may be right-wing and leaning to the right, but will they take the risk? Will they risk the very future and the constitutional position of the Supreme Court? So that is the question. Now, going back to the British papers, realizing that the American crisis still continues, and the particular piece that Corbyn has been kind of linked to in The Guardian, that the Facebook and Netflix should be taxed to fund the BBC. Now, that headline obviously is based on what must have been said or released by or on behalf of Corbyn. I said that that is a tactical mistake because it actually paints Corbyn as being against business, which is the characterization they will make soon of that particular intervention or kind of opinion. So the better and the wiser and the more intelligent, or the intelligent way Corbyn should have issued that would have been to include the many. Include the many and to question the impunity from proper tax that Facebook has been allowed to enjoy. That way, Corbyn would not have come across as a kind of zealot against business. Not that I am an agent of the idea of that kind of big business, but that is what the kind of opponents of Corbyn's intervention would say. And opponents meaning those who would support Facebook and Netflix. The other thing is that Facebook, let's take the kind of billionaire kind of thing. What is the mystery of these people? Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and Bill Gates and Elon Musk becoming billionaires. Where do the billions come from? This is explained in Charlie Marx's surplus value. And so therefore, instead of talking about the tax on Facebook and Netflix, Corbyn should have been asking the question as to where do these billions come from? Now, the first answer, or the first plank of the platform against Facebook and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos is the ordinary people who are the users of Facebook and Microsoft. Well, they are the ones that are used by people contributing their thoughts, their ideas, and their contributions every day, round the clock, without any payment. So imagine a situation where the user ceases to use Facebook, let's say. Zuckerberg will have no platform to extract billions of pounds of advertising revenue from the advertisers. Hope it is very clear. So Corbyn and anyone else who kind of feels that Facebook should be taxed should not be talking about the taxing, because the word taxing automatically serves as a trigger of extreme hostility by the very wealthy that steal the money and fail or refuse to pay the tax. So avoid that excuse and the trigger and cover them under the more rational and more kind of plausible argument. If the masses, the millions of people who use Facebook, stop using the Facebook, then Facebook would exist only as a fraction of what it is now. and it would then disappear. Let's put that agenda and the kind of half smart kind of utterances by this overstated new democratic kind of congresswoman AOC about Facebook is completely redundant and obsolete. I mean, she has got enough kind of manipulation tricks, but she hasn't got enough intelligence. So her kind of short questioning of Mark Zuckerberg recently was overstated and overhyped, and she did not address the real problem that besets the American society. And the problem is that her and Sanders and others are semi-intelligent in the sense of what is the need of society. They tinker. And Sanders is a kind of completely, overhyped kind of stuntman. Sanders doesn't actually answer most of the corruption and most of the criminality of the big business and the war, the military industrial complex. He has now kind of taken a new word. The complex he has used as a kind of imitation of the original phrase of military industrial complex. But Sanders, like the overstated kind of Noam Chomsky, these people are essentially agents of imperialism, agents of the corrupt kind of culture. And it is the corrupt culture that uses them to promote them as part of their internal kind of dispute. Neither Chomsky nor Sanders represents the truth that affects the majority of the people in the world, or in fact, the majority of the ordinary people in the USA or in Canada, North America, or that block of countries and cultures. And therefore, Sanders, if he had been the kind of candidate for the Democrats, would have been sunk within 24 hours. Because Sanders is too much artificiality. And he hasn't damaged the kind of foundation of the corruption and the corrupt facades that dominate the USA even now. So Biden, for that reason, would have succeeded where Sanders would have failed in the propaganda, in the brainwashing, not in substance. Of course, in comparison with Sanders, Biden is not anywhere near as substantial. But the point is not about substance. It's about the propaganda, about the fake news and the brainwashing, which dominate the discourse in public in the USA. And when the Guardian pretentiously runs this headline without any quotation marks about Corbyn saying that Facebook and Netflix should be taxed, the Guardian does it typically ignorantly and idiotically and falsely, because it doesn't say the main wealth of Facebook comes from the people contributing, using as users with accounts. Which is why, and let's explain the secret there, which is why we don't have the Facebook account that the Khoodeelaar campaign has. We don't tout for friends and we don't follow friends. We make occasional comments on other people's posts, but we don't follow, because if we followed, we would have 100,000 followers by now if we had done that since we started the kind of publishing on the Facebook account. Now, we don't write or we don't post things as based on how many people will see it, each item. That doesn't matter. What matters is for us to post our particular item or items for the record. That's it. Having said that, the reason why Facebook wants to endlessly expand the numbers of people becoming friends and following other people and kind of promoting their own kind of posts and images and the selfies and the narcissism and all the other things is so that it has got a wider, ever widening platform created for it by people giving their time for free. Now it's absolutely billions of pounds every day or billions of dollars every day that is being generated by these people who are wrongly called free account holders on Facebook. The opposite is the case. They are the ones who are owed money by Facebook. So Zuckerberg should be made to pay money to all the people holding a Facebook account. That would begin the solution to the monstrosity of not just Facebook but the others as well, that apparently allow people to run free accounts on their platforms. It's not free at all. So the Guardian is not talking about that, nor is, of course, Corbyn. Corbyn is coming across as a petty-minded, ignorant person who half understands or quarter understands society and the economy. And of course, he doesn't understand these platforms. So he's saying at the speech in the speech at the Edinburgh Television Festival, where he will say, let's say, he will propose a digital license fee to help fund the BBC, paid for by a tax on major tech businesses and broadband providers. And he will suggest that license fee payers should elect representatives to the BBC's governing board, potentially handing power to critics of the broadcaster's news output. Advocate introducing charitable status for the not-for-profit journalistic outfits, giving tax breaks to organizations. And he will require the BBC to publish equality data, including for social class, for all creators of Wisconsin, whether in-house or external. Well, it's not something new because he has borrowed it from some other people, and we have been saying more than that anyway. But the point is that will not make the BBC accountable or change unless there is recognition by Corbyn of these people himself. Corbyn or his band of the kind of Labour Party MPs are racist and are ignorant and are anti-democratic and not accountable and corrupt. And unless they deal with those things and stop behaving as if they have got a special entitlement because they're MPs or similar, nothing will change. And karma, we say karma because karma is the kind of consequence of somebody's action. Keir Starmer is taking the things down, of course, as we said from the beginning, because Keir Starmer is a liar and a secret conservative. His recorded the Crown Prosecution Service as the DPP shows that he was a conservative, he was a right winger, and he's a bad conservative in the sense that he was not a kind of fair minded conservative. That is conceivably possible to conceive of, like, some of the older conservatives, older that is no longer in parliament or no longer in post. And one of the main kind of names of the conservatives in the older kind of thing frame is, of course, Harold Macmillan, and the other one, of course, Ted Heath. But despite that, neither Macmillan nor Heath went anywhere near far enough to constitute an acceptable socially conscious and caring party. Just like the current kind of faker in the USA, Mitt Romney. We have noted Mitt Romney's kind of criticism of Trump. But when it comes to the actual agenda, Romney is as much a right winger as the next Republican who doesn't want society, who doesn't want the end of big business capitalist exploitation. He's a billionaire, by the way, himself as well, just like Trump. But in some cases, Trump has been exposed as a crook, and Romney has not been exposed as a crook. The difference is that Trump has held that position, which has attracted the scrutiny that Romney hasn't attracted the kind of scrutiny in any way comparable to that. So essentially, the media in Fleet Street is committing lies and crimes and diversions. And this piece about the Corbyn kind of attack on the Facebook is opportunistic of the Guardian, because the Guardian generally is uncritical of the big business and big techs. So if the Guardian kind of shifts its line, it would be a significant event to observe. And it's saying now, Andrew Sparrow, the political correspondent, is saying that Boris Johnson is not the secret weapon of the Conservatives. Let's see what it says. Replacing Theresa May with Boris Johnson or other putative leadership candidates would not boost the Conservative Party's chances of winning the next election, a poll has suggested. In findings that will offer some relief to the Prime Minister, an ICM survey for whatever, this is not complete because we have to get the main paper. So there is no details on the internet about the rest of the story. But essentially, what is happening in the press is completely second hand, because this one is not an investigation by the Guardian or the Andrew Sparrow. It is a rehash of the latest poll about the internal kind of differences among the conservatives. And that poll, like all the polls, since the kind of polling corruption began in Britain, is in denial. It is based on denial. It is not a social, economic poll, and it doesn't look at the actual behavior of the institutions, the behavior of the parts of the state. And it doesn't, of course, correlate the behavior of the media and the political parties or the government or the ministers, or the behavior of the internal behavior or kind of fractions or frictions or the differences or the battles going on within the parties, which battles are again kind of not concerned about the society and the needs of democracy, accountability. So it's all a fakery and falsehood. And the media, as I said earlier, for hundreds of years, the Fleet Street papers have been telling lies to the people about everything. Now, it is clear that they would be lying because the ownership has been always controlled by liars. So the concept of accountability, transparency, justice, equality, fairness, universality, these concepts are alien to the brainwashing centuries under the British media and the British press. It wasn't called media, it was, of course, called press. And even now, the word press is more substantially used than the concept of media. And for example, the so-called debate about the UK's membership of the European Economic Community and later the European Union. The debate has been completely falsely staged and reported by the Fleet Street. And this applies to any recognition by Fleet Street of the existence of the United Nations. And this applies to the British institutions, other institutions, the academic institutions like Oxford and Cambridge. These are unbearably, untruthfully overhyped. The idea of Oxbridge as being equal to superior knowledge on the part of the students and the academic kind of careerists is absolute criminal. And this has never been scrutinized. This has never been kind of subjected to proper scrutiny by the others, and most certainly not by the media, not by the MPs, and not by any leader of any party. So when somebody like a student, like an Asian kind of schoolboy or schoolgirl from, say, the London Borough of Newham is selected to go to one of the colleges in Cambridge or Oxford, that becomes a news item. That is so criminal on so many levels. First of all, it's racist. And secondly, it is completely untenable. It's not sustainable by the evidence. One Newham schoolboy who went to Eton or was selected to go to Eton was quoted as saying about Eton things that could only be said by a religious fanatic about their religious kind of destination. It's like Eton was a place of worship. That is how bad the brainwashing is. It's not education. It's not about schooling. It's not about society. And it's more certainly not about gaining the necessary knowledge to serve society. That's one of the weaknesses in the confusion between schooling and education. Education should be about serving humanity, other humanity, and society, and serving the planet, and telling the truth. Education is being twisted to do this, to convey and denote the opposite. It's a craft, it's a trick, it's a collection of tricks. That is how education is being packaged. So if you look at the numbers of people making the decisions in Fleet Street papers as executives and as quote journalists and editorial staff, you would find totally unacceptably high proportion of people with tags connected with Oxbridge than with anything else, any other institutions or backgrounds. And there is no acceptance by those who, quote, edit the Fleet Street titles or commission the particular contributions. There is no acceptance of society generally. The evidence is on the list at number 5 or 6. There are some other considerations, including the interview given to the what is now known as Press Gazette, but I call it still called the UK Press Gazette, which is what the full name was. The Financial Times man, who was editor for a long time, who is not with the Financial Times anymore, but he gave the interview, which I've accessed in the last 48 hours. And the Press Gazette interview says that to him, this editor of the Financial Times for so long, news and accountability and transparency and democracy didn't come anywhere near the priorities. It was Financial Times as a kind of seller of stuff. And it is a seller of lies and mythologies disguised as financial news. Exactly what I had said the previous week, without knowing of the interview by this man, Barba, given to either the Press Gazette or to anyone else. I had said the Financial Times is the conveyor, the courier of lies for big business and their agencies. And that is the case. Because there is nothing in the Financial Times that actually talks about the financial conditions of the people. I'm not saying that it should support one side or the other in the divide in financial terms. That is to say, the poor and the rich and the so on. What I'm saying in this context about the Financial Times is of the same principle that I apply to the lying and the betrayal and the denials history, brainwashing history of the rest of the so-called Fleet Street over the last 200 years. Financial Times has been in existence for 131 years. So let's say it's over 100 years. And it has been following the same. Contrary to Barbar's claim as retailed by the UK Press Gazette. Now, the Press Gazette editor and the business model is to suck up to these kind of press people and peddle their lies. That's how they stay in business. They shouldn't be. That is the wrong model. So the model that needs to be established in society and the model that society needs in Britain as well as in the rest of the world is the model that is based on the experience of people and the needs of people. That is not provided by the model of socialism, no matter who interprets it, let alone of communism, no matter who interprets it or updates it accordingly, allegedly. It is the model that I am prescribing, that I am specifying, and I am spelling out. The model is based on telling the truth. And it is not based on any particular kind of affiliation with any particular faith. It is the evidence that exists, irrespective of who the people are and what their faith is, or whether they have any faith or not. In the kind of concession that various criminals in posts, in political posts, kind of stage when the pressure against them becomes strong, they spew a lot of slogans, like John Biggs has been spewing this past week, that he is giving the people the chance to vote on whether to keep the corrupt post of mayor going in Tower Hamlets. And one of John Biggs's co-liars operating again within the Tower Hamlets Labour Party is saying that whatever model the people choose should be one that provides accountability. That is news. John Biggs even mentioning accountability. This is a crook who tramples on accountability every time. This is a crook that lies every time. So it's a spin, it's a fake news. Even if there is a referendum and even if there is an end to the corruption of the mayor, does not mean that the council will become free of corruption. A lot more, hell of a lot more needs to be changed, and a lot more needs to be introduced. We shall be continuing.